Welcome to Read Brave, a community-built podcast from the Graphomania Podcast Network. I'm Vinton Bain.
From Point North Media, I'm Alastair Stephens.
I'm very excited for this episode because I got to talk with Cullen Bunn, writer of X-Men Blue, and we have that interview as a segment for you to listen to. But before we get started in our episode, I have a bit of news. For the foreseeable future, Corey and Scout will not be able to make every episode with us. Corey is going to graduate school for library science, and due to some other circumstances, getting here to record every episode is too much for them in this season. They will be coming back from time to time, so we're not saying goodbye to them fully. I have decided to keep the podcast going, and on the bright side, I'm going to try to do it weekly for a little while to see if I can do that without killing myself. Being that this podcast is only one of many things I have going on. Without Corey and Scout here every episode, I had an idea to make this podcast even more community built. I decided to try out having guest hosts. And as you heard, today I am joined by the wonderful Alastair Stephens, previously of Storywalk, now of Point North Media, a brilliant podcaster and a baller scholar. Alastair, thank you for joining me today.
I could hear the hashtag before baller scholar there. It is a pleasure to be here with you, Vinton. I'm glad to sit down and talk comics.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could be on the show. So, as we normally start these shows, what comic media have you been consuming lately?
Lately, actually, I've been reading more widely, more broadly than I have for a while. I kind of fell out of comics for a little while. And then when I was reading comics, it was all thanks to my Marvel Unlimited subscription. Yeah. This is not a paid advertisement because that allows you to delve back into great and weird historical stories. I was reading a lot of 70s Fantastic Four, a lot of 70s Spider-Man, actually, which I was really enjoying. And then
good stuff.
Going back to weird stuff that I remembered from my childhood. I went and read Maximum Carnage, which is a genuinely terrible story. And yet I kind of love it.
Yeah, that's my relationship with all comics that were coming out as I was a child.
Yeah, Maximum Carnage, reread Executioner's Song, which is, that's bombastic. I mean, there's a lot in that story. It's pretty good. As you can tell, I think I'm more of a Marvel guy than I am a DC guy, but I'm trying to expand my range a little bit, and I'm really excited for what DC's been doing with Rebirth. I've read a few issues over the course of the last, well, I guess it's been almost a year now since Rebirth started, but I've been trying to catch up, and I've been hearing good things, and I'm building a list of reading that I'll get to in the near future. Apart from that, I mean, there are some movies around, I guess, that you may have heard of. I've been seeing a few of those. I've kind of fallen off the wagon with TV. I was really into the CW DC stuff for a while. I still think that Flash is a great, though sometimes misguided show. Supergirl, I think, is just a ray of sunshine. I absolutely love that, though I get that it is not perhaps the most ambitious TV show in the entire world. That's all good stuff. Apart from that, it's been getting back into just making a regular habit of reading comics. So I've been going back and reading, what have I just read? I just read 1602 by Neil Gaiman again I mean, maybe the fifth time because I just love that series.
Such a great idea.
It's so good. And then I'm not going to say what the final reveal is, but when you get to the final reveal, it is enormously satisfying.
Right.
Absolutely love that. Trying to think what else I've been reading. We just finished reading the Tom King Vision series.
That's right.
For our comics podcast, Excelsior, that we produce over at Common Room Radio, which is, it is just hands down one of the best things that I have read in a long, long while.
I was so glad to dive back into that with a critical eye and take my time with it. It paid off greatly.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The more we looked into it and the longer the discussion went, I felt the more I got out of it, even after being completely won over in the first instance. It's a heck of a comic book.
Awesome. So as for myself, I decided not to run down the long-winded list of things I read every week anymore. If you actually want me to do that, let me know and I'll continue doing so. But until then, I'm just going to do the highlights.
Sure. Sounds good.
So first, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur issue number 17. This was a bit of fan service to any X-Men fan of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because there's some time travel. The X-Men are there. They're hanging out in the mall, and they're fighting Doctor Doom. It's quite fantastic. So if you love any of those things, you'll want to check out this issue. And I'm really liking the way that they are growing Moon Girl as a character so quickly. They are just letting her explore herself as a superhero and as the smartest person in the Marvel universe and what that means. And she's learning that even being the smartest person in the Marvel universe, you could still need to rely on the help of others and the community around you of superheroes that you have available to you. So that's a really awesome thing to see. Also, Invincible Iron Man number 5. This is one of the best issues yet of this series. It really starts with this touching moment of Raimi Williams' mom. She's the new Iron Man, of course. And her mom is trying to come to terms with what it is to have a superhero for her daughter, a 15-year-old daughter.
Fantastic.
And she's like, she can't even drive yet. And she's flying off to save the day. And she's having this emotional, heartfelt moment. She thinks she's talking to the computer generated mind of Tony Stark, but then she's like, you're not even here. I'm just talking to myself. What's going on? It's a really funny moment, but it's really interesting to dive into the emotions of a mother of a young superhero and what that's like. Because that's not a side you get to see very often in the comics. And then we get to see Raimi deal with S.H.I.E.L.D. just the way they deserve to be dealt with. And it's quite fantastic. I love that little moment. So I'm still loving Invincible Iron Man. I love Raimi Williams. I encourage anyone that likes diversity in their comics to pick up this new series of Invincible Iron Man following this young, I think she's going by Ironheart, but they're not making too big of a deal of that.
They're not.
I think they're on the line of trying to decide whether they actually want to go through with it or not still.
Depending entirely on the response of the public, she will be Ironheart/Man.
I also read the last issue of All New X-Men, issue number 19 by Dennis Hopeless and Paco Diaz. This is the original 5 X-Men, the time displaced ones, reuniting once more, suitably enough, at a rest stop, and coming together and discussing the future and the unknowing future as the X-Men series is about to all change. And so it's very much a meta moment there. Excellent. As we're at a rest stop with the X-Men series coming into a new number 1s and new ongoing teams and a bunch of different changes going on. And it was a lot of fun to watch them just discuss that, to deal with some of the issues, to bring some closure to that. I'm sad that Kid Apocalypse and Idie won't be with the team anymore in X-Men Blue. Hopefully they will do something with the X-Men with them. Maybe they'll show up in Generation X. I haven't dived too deeply into the news to find that out. But I can't say enough how much I love Evan Sabanur, Kid Apocalypse. He's just wonderful. And there is kind of, I guess, spoilers. I mean, it's the last page, but all it is he says dance party and they all start dancing. And that's the whole page of panels is just the X-Men dancing.
If you're on the internet, you have seen that going around.
Yeah, it's
a
fantastic.
Great page. Just fantastic. It's really interesting to see what Marvel has done with the time displaced original X-Men because that was such a gamble, or felt at least at the time like such a gamble. That is such a high risk concept. The most interesting thing that it's allowed Marvel to do is really talk reflectively and kind of metatextually about the progress of comics, about how far comics have come, and to kind of speak to who these characters were and are and will be. Perhaps I'm really into that entire storyline. Yeah, absolutely, and you get some closure on the idea of them possibly returning to their own timeline in this issue. So we've been kind of waiting for that. We've gotten some hints here and there and some notions of what might be going on, but you get a lot more closure with that here in this issue. And I'm really excited to see what Cullen Bunn does with X-Men Blue, which is going to be following them. And of course, we'll talk about that in our interview upcoming. On that note, this past week, we got our previews of the new X-Men titles. We got Resurrection, free preview spotlight number 1, which had just a few pages from most of the stuff coming through there. I'll be honest, I skipped all the Inhuman stuff because there's only so much comics I can care about. And while there are a few Inhumans, Miss Marvel specifically, that I really love as like the royal family and everything, I don't care much. I've never connected with the Inhumans. Yeah. Never really found a story that's drawn me in. Though that's not to say that it can't happen. Yeah, definitely so. And if I have extra time, I will probably check that stuff out as well because it is now tied to the X-Men because of events going on. So I don't know if they'll continue that way or if they'll part ways, but the fact that they threw them all together in this Resurrection free preview spotlight makes me think that there will be some more connecting. It hurts me every time you say that. It hurts me badly. I'm not even looking at the word written down, and I'm still getting so mad about it. Yeah. Well, that's what you should be. Yeah. After definitely. 50 years of X-Men comics, they've run out of every possible pun, every possible play on words that they can use. Right. Now they're just reaching for it real hard. Yeah. I enjoyed all the previews to the team books and then the solos for some of the major characters, Jean Grey and Iceman. I'm not that excited about Cable, but we'll see. Maybe that'll be good. I don't know. The preview didn't really pull me in. I'm not really interested in the Weapon X, but I'll probably give that a try as well. But the rest of it, I'm really interested and really excited to see where the X universe goes from here. We also got X-Men Prime. This was an issue basically summing up a bunch of different things going on, bringing a closure to the X-Men stories as a whole. And
looking forward to the future and what they're going to be doing with that was Storm basically getting Kitty Pryde, bringing her back and saying, I need you to run the school and I think I'm going to leave.
Wow.
And then we just get a bunch of glimpses of what's going to be happening through that. And that was pretty fun. There was a scene in there where they touch on the Weapon X story and they have Lady Deathstrike, and it was a cool scene, but I just don't care about Lady Deathstrike, and I don't care to follow her as a protagonist.
Yeah, another character that I've never really.
We'll see what happens there. Oh, you haven't watched any Legion?
I haven't watched any Legion.
Okay.
I am ready. I am primed for Legion. I am into Legion as a character. The X-Men is like my corner of the Marvel universe. I'm really looking forward to it, and everything that I've heard about it sounds just fascinating and ambitious, and yeah, I'm in.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone has described the show to you. They don't, I mean, they show previews of what it's about, but I think the description of having watched it does way more for people. And I would describe it as if David Lynch made an X-Men related TV show.
That is literally everything I've ever wanted.
It has this British 60s psychedelic vibe that I just love. They haven't actually set the time, so I looked online and I couldn't find anything. I was like, is this set in the 60s? Because it just feels so 60s, but I think it's just a stylistic choice. I heard rumors that Patrick Stewart might show up in the next season as Charles Xavier. That would be really interesting. I don't know if there's anything behind those rumors, but that would be interesting.
It would seem to be an obvious connection, and Patrick Stewart has been known to take smaller profile roles from time to time. I could see that happening.
They did show, I was watching, I finished out the season. It ended with 8 episodes. And I think 2 or so episodes before the last one, they showed just a glimpse of the wheelchair with the X when they were talking about his history. And it was definitely looked like the one from the movies, the first 2 or 3 at least. So that was really exciting. It did get renewed for a second season for sure. And it's going to be 12 episodes, I heard. And that worries me just a little bit. I'm excited because I wanted more episodes. And when I finished, I was like, man, I want more episodes of that. But I learned a lesson from watching the Netflix Marvel shows, which is that not everything needs to be 12 or 13 episodes. 8 episodes might actually be a really good number. 10 episodes might actually be a really good number.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that a couple of years ago, that kind of half-season order felt short. That was the network demonstrating enormous restraint. Just 12 episodes.
Right.
And now you're right, because of the creep that we've seen in Jessica Jones, I think, is particularly bad for it. I could lose a couple of episodes out of the end of Jessica Jones. Daredevil moves very slowly in weird and fragmented ways. I think, you're right. There's something about the 6 or 8 or 10 at a push episode run that seems to serve these stories just really beautifully.
Absolutely. You, the further you push out episodes, the more of a risk you run of stretching things out and boring your viewers, or just making things unnecessarily long, which is a problem that TV shows have and that comics have had for a long time as well.
Very fair. Yes.
So that brings us to our segment for today, and that is our interview with Cullen Bunn, the writer of the upcoming X-Men Blue. I hope you enjoy it. So we are here with Cullen Bunn, writer of Uncanny X-Men, various Deadpool miniseries, The Sixth Gun, Harrow County, and the upcoming X-Men Blue, as well as many other great works. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So let's get started with something I saw this morning, which is Axel Alonso tweeted out a Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe again promotional shot. Can you confirm your involvement in this new series?
I can confirm nor deny anything. So, nope, I'm not even sure I know what you're talking about.
All right. I thought that might be the case since that tweet was just sent out and this is fresh new information, but I had to ask. So, on that same topic, has there been any talk about a third title in the Night of the Living Deadpool series?
I think we talked about it at one point, years ago, but it just, I guess it never really came together to do that one, which is a little sad for me, because that's of all the Deadpool things that I've done, the first series in that arc, Night of the Living Deadpool, is probably my favorite, still my favorite thing I've ever done with Deadpool. Nothing at this point, but never say never. I mean, there there were characters that I introduced in Return of the Living Deadpool that I really like and I have a lot of affection for. So there's always a chance that they'll show back up in some way, shape, or form.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see if that does happen in the future. Jumping from Deadpool to what I'm most excited about is the X-Men. Talking about your most recent run on Uncanny. Your run on Uncanny featured an unusual team lineup for an Uncanny title. Did you request those characters, or were those the characters that were given to you from higher up?
No, and it's different every time you get a project like this. With Uncanny X-Men, when I went into it, the most important thing for me was that I didn't have any characters who were double dipping. I didn't want, say, Old Man Logan to be on my team and then also on the book that Jeff Lemire was doing. So I was trying to avoid any characters appearing, double appearing in any series, and there was a lot of discussion. That was not my first team lineup.
Okay.
My first team lineup was very different. I mean, it was Gambit and Rachel Gray, and I think there were several versions, but at one point there was Nate Gray and Rachel Gray were on the same team. There were, it was a very different lineup. But in talking to the editors, they came to me and they said, well, we really want to figure out a way to make each of these books as drastically different tonally as we can. And that's when I came back and I said, well, if you really want to make it different, let's cast the leanest, meanest group of X-Men you could possibly imagine. And that's when we came up with that team that really looks like the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants when you look at it.
Yeah, I was really interested in that title and jumped on it pretty quickly, seeing the lineup. The characters weren't the characters that I follow most heartily, but it was so interesting to see them on an Uncanny title that I had to find out what was going on with that. Now I'm interested in wanting to see what this alternate reality team you could have written with Gambit and Rachel Gray would have looked like.
Well, yeah, I'm always, it's one of those things. I write these things down and I've got a notebook. I've got an X-Men notebook around my office somewhere. And if I were to look at it, I'm certain there's probably 6 to 8 pages that are just different team lineups. But yeah, it would have been obviously a very different book. But and there were different takes on. I mean, there was a version of it that they were just in space. It was going to be almost like a Starjammer. It was almost like a Starjammer series.
Yeah.
But yeah, it ended up being what it was, and I was very happy with the way that book turned out in the end.
Well, you'll have to publish some of those notes for us all to check out someday. I love that type of special feature stuff.
Yeah.
I would pay money for that. Moving to the future of the X-Men, you are going to be writing X-Men Blue, and All New X-Men has been one of my most favorite X-Men reads in recent times. I've loved to see this time-displaced team, these younger X-Men, and how they've joined the fray in our current Marvel universe. What can you tell us about X-Men Blue at the moment? I know it's pretty early and you can't say too much.
X-Men Blue, much like X-Men Gold, is going to be sort of a return to classic superhero X-Men stories. And I kind of embrace that with this book. It's very much, it's obviously this is the original five X-Men, but I still kind of really embraced sort of my Claremont roots with this series.
Well, that's exciting to hear.
It's going to be, it's the original 5 X-Men, but they're going to be on some classic X-Men adventures and dealing with a number of villains and some new villains, some classic villains, some villains you haven't seen in a couple of decades, some that and some guest stars and other heroes you haven't seen in a couple of decades or close to it. But it's going to be those characters going on, just a number of wild, crazy adventures. There's going to be long story arcs, which I used to like when I was reading X-Men in my youth.
Yeah.
I used to love that they would seed story arcs in issue, say, 1 that don't pay off until issue 12 or 13.
Yeah, it's beautiful
they're seeding that stuff through. So there's going to be, some interesting long story arcs and lots of things, lots of stories playing out at the same time as we go through the arcs. and I really believe some storylines that will take readers completely by surprise. Some things that they'll never be expecting.
I was excited to hear about Black Tom and Juggernaut being in the series, and then to see Black Tom show up in the preview. So I'm excited to see what you'll do with those two villains specifically, and the future unknown ones that you're going to be bringing up. I also heard that you're creating some new characters for this series, and I'm very excited about that. I always like to see what different writers come up with for characters in an X-Men series.
Yeah, it's gonna be it's fun. Like Black Tom and Juggernaut. I picked them because I felt like they were they had the right tone I wanted to set for the series, and they, to me, they rank right up there. They rank very high in terms of when you think of iconic classic X-Men villains, they rank very high there.
Absolutely.
And this is a series too. As much as I say there are going to be long story arcs playing out, and that's very, very true, I'm going real lean and mean on issues. So I mean, we're jumping through a number of focal point stories very quickly, and going So we're gonna, just for no other reason, I want to make sure we're getting to see all these characters that I want to bring into the book. I want to make sure people see them. So yeah, Black Tom and Juggernaut are in the first issue, but we're moving on to a different kind of story in the second and third issue, and in the fourth and fifth issue we move into yet another different kind of story, focusing on different characters, and all along we'll be, like I said, weaving in these new these story threads.
Well, that's really exciting. I can't wait to pick it up myself and start this series and see where you take it. Also, I agree with Iceman in the preview that I'm a little sad that Pickles isn't around anymore.
I had to get rid of Pickles because Dennis Hopeless created him, and I will do nothing that I can do nothing that Dennis Hopeless creates. And that's just a joke. It's Dennis and I are very good friends, but we like to say that we don't like each other.
Yeah, I've seen you have a bit of a friendly rivalry between each other.
And he likes to, in his interviews, he likes to talk about how much of a monster I am. But people often take it seriously, so that's why I'll quickly say no, that's not true.
Good. I'm glad that our X-Men creators are friends.
But I heard, and I haven't received my copy of X-Men Prime yet, which came out this week. But I heard Pickles was in it, and so I think he still has a place in the Marvel universe. So we'll see where he shows up.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Moving on from there, which of the X-Men titles, aside from your own, are you most excited about, these new ones that are coming out?
Well, I'll probably say I'm real excited about Jean Grey.
Yeah.
I know what Dennis has planned for it. I think Dennis is I think he's a master at writing these young characters, and I just think the book he has in mind is going to be one of the most fun in the bunch. But I think I really do. I think the vast majority of them look real exciting to me.
Yeah, I'm really excited about all of them. I'm really interested to see where they go from here and how Marvel handles the X-Men. And it's going to be interesting to see Jean Grey. You mentioned before that you didn't want to double up on any characters. I imagine it's hard as a writer to work with a character that is in two different ongoing series or more, as is often the case, and try to juggle with, oh, but they're in space now, but then they're here doing this thing, and where does this timeline match up? And comics.
Yeah, no, it's that can be a little bit of a headache, and we have Cyclops is in the Champions as well as this book, and Iceman will be appearing in this book as well as the Iceman ongoing. But it's just a matter of, to some degree, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes these characters are going to be in space and seemingly on Earth at the same time, and there's absolutely nothing that can be done. Except just to buckle in and enjoy the ride, really.
It's all timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly.
Right. You can't, I learned long ago that the more you think about time and in comics, the more frustrating it becomes to you. So just kind of embrace it and go for it,
Yeah.
Don't worry so much about it. And that's for readers and for writers, to be honest.
Yeah, I always like the Jay and Miles theory that Franklin Richards is just controlling everything and keeping people at certain ages and changing things at all times in the Marvel universe.
Well, you know what? Maybe that's the case. That would be I can accept that. That's what I'll go with too. They should get a no prize for that one.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm so excited about all the new X-Men stuff. I could talk forever about that, but you're a busy man and I have some more questions to get to.
Sure.
So let's move into some questions I got from listeners.
Okay.
The first one is, will the Sixth Gun ever be optioned for a movie or TV show again? We know about the pilot that got put forth that didn't actually end up going anywhere. Is there still talks about that becoming something?
You know what? Your guess is as good as mine at this point. It's one of those things. There were lots of talks about it for a while after the pilot was made, and there were lots of talks about picking it up somewhere else. But those have definitely kind of died down. They've died down until the moment that they resurface and come back up. At some point, someone will start talking about it again. But right now, there's not a lot of discussion on it. But again, I would say never, because it will not surprise me, at all if people start looking to it and saying they want to try something else with it. It's at the time, the network just felt like it was too expensive to make a Western TV show.
Yeah.
Which is funny with Westworld, coming out and everything now. But we'll see. If they were to make another one, they'd have to basically go back to formula and do something completely new and completely different.
Yeah.
Just because the actors that were in the show have moved on, the creative teams that were behind the show have moved on to other projects. But yeah, I had people over a few months ago and we watched the pilot. We actually played it a couple of times because we had a lot of people here and they were, they really got excited about it and got into it. And it makes me sort of a bittersweet feeling. It's nice that everybody loved what they saw and they were really enjoying it, but it's sad that it is not going to come to pass anytime soon, at least.
Well, maybe with Westworld and then Legends of Tomorrow doing a lot of Western stuff like they have, maybe that will spark some new interest and we'll get to see some momentum on that becoming something. I would really enjoy that.
Yeah, you never know when someone there in Hollywood thinks about that book and starts trying to push on what happened to it.
Following up on that, we had another question asking if you knew where the Sixth Gun was going from the beginning or if you let it evolve as a story toward the end when you were writing it.
So with the Sixth Gun, we knew what the end was while we were working on the first arc. So yes, I knew where the story was going. I knew what the end would be. And we knew some of the milestones along the way. It wasn't set up like I couldn't have told you this book will end at issue 50 at that point.
Yeah.
At one point it was going to end at issue 36. At one point it was going to end at issue 60. It just, that part was a little, we had a little wiggle room room to play. But we knew what the ending was, and we knew, I'd say probably the, 8 major beats along the way that we had to hit before we got to that end point.
From that same person, they also wanted to know if you have any plans on returning to the world of Sixth Gun and your writing.
Oh, maybe. I mean, if you've read the Sixth Gun, we told that story, and we said, it's but there are definitely, there's definitely a lot of love for that world and that universe. If I were to do something else with Sixth Gun, it would not be a Drake Sinclair or Becky Moncrief story. It would be a story about some other aspect of the world or other characters. So maybe, right now I got plenty on my plate.
Absolutely.
But there's always, I always think about the Sixth Gun and what we could do with it, if we were to return to it.
Another listener was curious how you got the job writing Bride of Spiders issue of Immortal Weapons, if you requested it or if you were tapped because of the horror vibe.
I have no idea how that came about. It was when that book came out, I was just getting. I don't even know if Six Gun had started coming out when I did the Immortal Weapons comic, but I'd done the Damned with Oni Press,
Yeah.
and I had been knocking on Marvel's door, and this was just, it was sort of them throwing me a bone, I guess. They said, here, you can try this, this issue of Immortal Weapons. And it was, that was really my first Marvel project, and I'd love to tell you it went super smooth, but it did not. It was it was really I can say this now because the editor I was working with is no longer there at Marvel, but it was a nightmare scenario.
Oh, no.
It was, everything about it was a problem, and I was it's one of those things. I filled up a notebook just on that single issue, trying
man.
I had it right at the beginning, and I think I filled up a notebook trying to get it to where the editor would finally approve it. And to say that story is vastly different than what I originally pitched would be a real understatement, because it was a horror story, and I think it's a surprise to me it turned out as well as it did.
Yeah.
But the original pitch was much more of a horror story, and honestly, it was much more of an origin of the Bride of Nine Spiders, and would have been a lot more interesting, I think, if they'd have just let me run with it, to be honest. But that was, I don't know how many years ago. It feels like forever ago. It was early on in my career, and there are things I could have pushed back on probably a little more stringently, but I didn't. I went with it, and it came out as it came out. But yeah, I didn't request it. They came to me, and it was a book that the Immortal Weapons book, most of the creators on it were people they were trying out, seeing how they could do with projects. I mean, Jason Aaron did the first issue, but then I think all the other issues were written by people they were trying out.
Well, I'm glad that you came through to the other side of that hard project and continued to work with Marvel.
It was super exciting. Well, I don't know. People may not have seen it. I was thinking, I was just watching the Iron Fist TV show, and I really loved. I didn't know what they were going to do with Bride of Nine Spiders, but I really loved, like when they first show that character on the door outside her office, it just says BS9S, and I was like, oh, that stands for the Bride of Nine Spiders. That was great. I got a little excited about that part. I love that, and strangely, she was super true. I mean, when her appearance wise, at least, she was really true to the Bride of Nine Spiders in the comics. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, I enjoyed that moment, and I enjoyed that they put her in the show there.
Yeah.
Jumping off from that question, the last listener question we have is actually about what are the biggest differences to you between working for Marvel and then working on your own projects, good or bad?
Well, both kinds of work satisfy different desires. I mean, you work on a book like, I grew up reading Marvel comics. I grew up loving those characters, and those characters, the X-Men in particular, mean a great deal to me. So working on an X-Men book is awesome from the aspect of I get to contribute to this, to this world that meant so much to me. But the and these are not necessarily drawbacks, but the thing you got to keep in mind is I'm writing characters who I don't own, I don't control, and I have to make sure I'm playing ball with other creators who may be working with them, other editorial plans for the characters, and these editorial plans could be in motion, for years down the line, a couple of years down the line, or they could come up out of nowhere. So you have to, you have that, I have that I have to deal with, and it's a situation where 9 times out of 10, the editor and I have a wonderful relationship, and we're genuinely working on making the comics awesome. But occasionally you get strange requests, and I can put my foot down and say I don't want to do that. but the editor can easily say, well, then you're not going to write this book. Yeah. So, in the end of the day, the editor and the publisher have the control, and they're going to have the final say. Creator-owned projects, though, I have the final say, and there's no, it's not a situation where I'm getting a lot of editorial notes. I'm not, and if I do get editorial notes, they're mine to ignore or consider, at my leisure. And it's solely on me with these books. And when I say solely on me, it's on me and the co-owner on the project. Usually, the artist may own, be a co-creator on it, and they obviously have a say on it as well. But yeah, it just falls solely on my shoulders, and it succeeds or fails on me. And that's there's something very satisfying about creating your own work and standing by it and really, having that final say.
Yeah, absolutely. And you seem to do a good job of being able to do both well. So
sometimes, I think there are people who balance it a lot better than I do, but yeah, it's and you're absolutely right. They take very different skill sets to be able to work in both realms, I think.
And our final listener question, and I'm not sure if they have a precedent for asking this, if you said that you really like this series or wanted to do it, but they asked, if you could write Tomb of Dracula, what would the setup look like possibly?
Holy mackerel. Well, I think maybe they just know that that's the kind of book I would love to write.
Yeah.
But if I could, it would be an amazing thing. I would love to write Tomb of Dracula. But you asking me right here, right now, I'm not sure I have the
a little too on the
answer.
Spot.
I don't know if I have the answer to what it would be. I can tell you that it would be. I mean, it would be a very dark take on. I mean, and it would be Marvel's Dracula, but it would be a very dark take on that character. And I would probably want to take him back. Currently he's kind of like this in Marvel. He's kind of this armored up dude with long white hair, I think.
Yeah.
No, I'd take him back to slicked back black hair and pencil thin mustache Dracula.
Good.
But yeah, I don't know what it would be, but it would be a very dark. It would absolutely be a horror comic, 100%.
Well, back to my question, since I'm selfish. So one of the first works I picked up solely based off of your name being a writer was The Empty Man. And I really loved that series that you did. And it reminded me a lot of watching The X-Files in the 90s. Was that a big influence on that work?
When I was writing it, I didn't necessarily think of it as being influenced by X-Files. Mainly because, X-Files was such an episodic thing. Every week was a new episode. But yeah, absolutely. Now I look back on it, and it X-Files had an influence on it. Maybe not as much as Chris Carter's other show, Millennium, probably had a huge influence on it as well, because Empty Man was a very very dark series.
Definitely.
But it's a book that I feel like probably pulled inspiration from a lot of different places. But yeah, I didn't necessarily think it was an X-Files type story, but the correlation's there for sure.
Jumping to another of your works that you're still working on, do you have an ending planned out for Harrow County, or are you just letting that story grow and seeing where it takes you?
No, much like the Six Gun, we have an ending in mind for Harrow County, and we actually I have an outline for every issue up until the ending of the series. So I know where it's ending. I don't want to say where that ending is just yet, but it is definitely moving towards a specific climax. So we won't. It's not a book that I'll stick with forever.
Right.
And I just really feel like especially with creator owned, it's good to have an ending in mind for a lot of this stuff, and I feel like it just gives the book a little more focus for a book like Harrow County or a book like The Six Gun. It's just a good way to focus the title. Really.
Yeah, I was talking with some of my co-hosts recently about how we love it when a creator-owned title like that does have an ending, like Sweet Tooth or Why the Last Man, that you can loan it to somebody and be like, hey, look, this is just this many volumes. You should check it out. And you don't have to go,
Right.
hey, you should check this out. There's like 500 issues. I don't know what to tell you, but yeah, I really want you to read all of them.
Yeah, it's it's like I said, it's sad to leave a series that you love, and when Harrow County's over, I'll be sad about it. But I'll also remember, I'll also be happy to have told the story we wanted to tell.
Right. So you have a new horror series coming from Image called Regression. What can you tell us about this series?
So Regression is a supernatural conspiracy story, and it's definitely it's definitely got a lot of horror elements. It's the story of this everyday average schlub named Adrian who starts experiencing these waking nightmares, these terrible visions, and in an effort to get rid of these nightmares, he agrees to undergo hypnotherapy, and part of that hypnotherapy is a past life regression. And that's where things really go wrong for him, because he visits a past life that just was involved in some really, really heinous, awful things, and something follows him back when he wakes from his hypnosis. Something follows him back, and his horrific visions only get worse, and he starts experiencing lost time, and he starts to wonder if he himself is involved in some really terrible things in the current day and age. It's and like I said, and from there it kind of expands out. That we really build a world into it. We build a lot of conspiracy into the book. There's some. It goes into some places that from the it seems like one kind of story in the first issue, and by the the fourth and fifth issue, we've turned that on its ear, and it's a different kind of story. And then we continue to kind of change it up and make some big changes to this what becomes a real sweeping horror story.
Well, that's exciting. I look forward to that title. We here at the podcast love everything Image puts out. We think everything they end up putting out is gold. I don't know how they're picking, but they're picking very well these days. So I imagine you working with Image is going to be nothing less than gold. So it's very exciting to hear that you're going to be doing the title for them.
Yeah, I'm excited to finally be doing something with Image. It's been I've been talking with them for years about doing something, and it just comes down to when the time is right. And finally, and this is just my first, it's the first of it's easy for me to say first of many projects, because I'll be doing, I've got several other Image projects already in various stages of development. So first of many is Regression.
Well, you saying first of many brings me right to my next question, that on top of the other things we've already mentioned, you also have a new title from Boom, The Unsound. You're returning to the Damned from Oni. You're working on the new Monsters Unleashed ongoing for Marvel. You're writing Darth Maul for the Star Wars side of Marvel. You're still doing Micronauts for IDW, if I'm not mistaken. Have I missed anything in that?
Oh yeah, you've missed, because I'm doing Conan for Dark Horse.
Right.
I'm and so
you're working for every comic company right now.
almost not everyone, but I am working for quite a few, and there are some projects that haven't even been announced that I'm also working on as well. So it's I don't know what the question was, but I'm imagining that it was, are you insane?
Yeah, I think the question that I didn't get to quite, because I wanted to make sure I had all the titles first, was how do you juggle working on all of these titles at the same time and keep them straight?
Well, it's a lot of organization. It's a lot of I work on, typically I'll focus only on one project a day. I won't and if I focus on, let's say I do X-Men Blue, if I start on an X-Men Blue project one day, I'm not going to work on the Unsound that day, and I'll focus on the X-Men Blue until it's done, if that's a few days, a week or whatever. But it's all a bunch of, organizing things into folders and organizing my notes into folders. And I'll admit, I'm probably I'm at my absolute limit right now.
Yeah.
So, I'm very excited that some of my miniseries are coming to an end.
Yeah.
I finished Darth Maul Darth Maul's been written for,
Oh, okay.
months now. I'm done with that. And that's the other thing you have to keep in mind is sometimes it looks like I'm writing, all of these books all at one time, and that's not necessarily the case.
Right. They're just being released.
Darth Maul's been done for a while. Regression, while it is an ongoing series, we've had 7 issues done for years.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's I've written those scripts a long time ago, and so to some degree it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors. It's not me working on all these things at once, but absolutely right now I'm at my limit. I'm at my limit, and I have to keep reminding myself when I complete these projects not to get in a frenzy to replace them. So, I finished Darth Maul. I don't want to immediately rush out and try to find, try to get someone to give me another project. I need to give myself a little more breathing room. So I'm working towards, right now, it's shocking that I'm even sitting here doing an interview because I'm pretty busy right now, but I'm also looking, forward to within a couple of months, I'll have fewer projects on my plate than I've had in a couple of years, and I don't even know how that's gonna. I don't know how that's probably gonna feel very uncomfortable to me not to have that many.
Yeah.
I'll feel like I'm twiddling my thumbs.
I think you're at your limit, and I think that people that follow you and will buy anything that has your name on it, their pull lists are probably at their limit too. The comic shops are like, we can't take the weight.
Yeah, that's the there's the thing, and I have a lot of people say, how do we keep up with everything you write? And I said, well, I don't know that I ever intended you to keep up with everything I do, because I'm it's one of those things. I don't necessarily expect people who read Regression to be X-Men Blue fans, or it's one of those things. I'm not, I'm super happy and I'm humbled when the people say they just want to read anything I write. That's awesome. Although, I don't expect them to write everything, to read everything or actually like everything, because, I try to do a different kind of book. I think people who like Regression, The Empty Man will like Regression, for instance. I think there are sort of tracks to what I'm doing. And I think if you like The Empty Man, you'd like Regression. And if you like, X-Men Blue, you'd probably like the Monsters Unleashed ongoing and things like that. But yeah, although please, those of you listening, if you buy everything I work on, don't stop. I appreciate it.
Well, that's one of the things that I like about you as an author, is that you do such a wide diversity of things that I think that anybody can pick up something of yours and find something that they enjoy in it. So that's a really good thing to do, and a good way to get your name out there. It's a good way to be known as a creator, that you have your finger in so many different pots. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that it's something I'm conscious of. I do think a lot of my creator-owned stuff is now sort of moving into, well, it's always sort of been in this horror and dark fantasy realm, and I think I'm cementing that even more as we go on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something I try to be aware of. So that's why I like to do a book, like Regression, which is an adult series, and I also did a book like Terrible Lizard a few years ago, which is a series completely geared towards kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to just do one kind of story.
Absolutely. So we already touched on this for the Six Gun specifically, but just in general over the multitude of your titles, what's the latest news on any of your titles being adapted for TV or movies?
Well, Harrow County is currently being being developed as a television show for Sci-Fi. There's a pilot script that's gone through many stages of discussion and edits that they're working on, and I think we're close to knowing something. Although close could be months and months down the line. The Empty Man, they just wrapped primary filming on a motion picture for The Empty Man.
That's exciting. I hadn't heard about that one.
Yeah, so it's probably, I mean, that's one that is probably the, who knows, again, how fast things come, how fast things come together and everything. But I'd say The Empty Man will be the first thing that hits theaters. I don't have a date yet, but they have been, they've wrapped primary photography on it. So that, that's out there. And, there's discussion on a number of other projects, but nothing definite enough that I could mention it. Those are the two that there's active, announced activity on.
Do you have any desire to work in other mediums, like creating original stories for TV or movies?
Oh yeah. If it's one of those things, I'm a writer who likes working in a lot of different areas. And yeah, every now and again, I get the itch to try my hand at something like that. It's when the Six Gun was in development, I was going to be part of the writer's room for that show. But the thing I have to remember is when I get involved, getting involved in those things takes, a little bit away from, working on comics. So it's one of those I have to decide what I enjoy the most, because, I want this job to continue to be something I love doing. So I just have to focus on what I love the most. Who knows when in a couple of months I have fewer comics on my plate than I've had in a couple of years, maybe that's when I start thinking about focusing on some of those other areas a little more aggressively.
So you already touched on it a little bit, talking about your organization with folders and working on specific titles for the day or for a few days at a time. But can you tell us in general, briefly, what does your writing process, what does a normal day in the office look like? Do you sit down in the office, lock yourself away? Do you go out to coffee shops? What does that look like?
I don't know that there's a normal day, but yeah, I have a private office here in my home, and I go to work typically around 7:30 in the morning. I go to work, and I work pretty straight until probably around 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Wow.
And then
that's how you get all that writing in.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of it is yeah, I work long hours, and I work on, I work every day of the week, and I work on weekends, and and sometimes I work at night. I almost always have a laptop with me nearby, and let's say we're watching some TV show that only is getting a little bit of my attention.
Yeah.
I'll be answering emails and, responding to questions about projects and things like that. Sometimes I do step out of the house, and I might go down to the coffee shop or the bar, and I sit, and I actually get a lot of work done, sitting at a coffee shop or bar. I don't know if it's the white noise or I don't know what it is. Yeah. Maybe it takes me back to, my college days and trying to work on projects, while sitting in a room full of other people or whatever. But I do a lot of outlining at when I'm outside the house, and outlining a project is really that's such a huge part of each issue, because once I have an outline done and I know what's going to happen in the issue, the writing it is not, that's the easy part. It's figuring out what beats are going to be in each issue, and what the high points of an issue are and things like that. Figuring that stuff out is a little more difficult and takes more time. And for whatever reason, sitting somewhere else with a notebook, I can usually, get a few issues outlined in just in a few hours. So yeah, sometimes I'll step out and just for a change of scenery and go do something like that.
Interesting. On that note, do you consume other media while you work? I know watching TV and movies is a little bit harder for a writer than a visual artist, but maybe listening to music or anything like that?
I don't do a lot. Sometimes I'll turn music on. But if it's music with lyrics, it's difficult for me.
Yeah.
So if I turn music, I have I used to have a huge collection of movie soundtracks. I still have them, but nowadays it's all Spotify or something.
Yeah.
Now it's you turn them. I can turn a soundtrack on Spotify uh, and a lot of times I'll try to let's say I'm working on a Conan story. I'll put in the Conan soundtrack, or there's a few different Conan soundtracks. I'll put those in and listen to those while I'm writing Conan. When I was writing Darth Maul, I sure listened to the Duel of Fate song, over and over again.
Yeah.
But most days I'm probably sitting here in silence. I mean, I've got Spotify right here on my computer, and I just forget to turn it on because
Right.
once I'm going on a project, I'm really working. I just don't even think about it.
Yeah.
It's not something that and I don't like to be slowed down. It sounds ridiculous, but just stopping to turn on Spotify if I think about it mid story is going to slow me down.
Yeah.
And I'd rather sit and actually just do the work. And I've kind of just conditioned myself to just do the work and not worry about turning on the music. I kind of I have a process where I do everything I need to do. I walk the dog and I go to the bathroom and I get myself a drink. I do all those things, and then I sit down and I say, okay, for the next hour and a half to 2 hours, I'm doing nothing but writing as fast as I can and as hard as I can. And anything else slows me down from that. And then when that 2 hours is done, I can take a break and I get all the other things done that I need to do for a few minutes, stretch, and then I come back and I do it again. And it's remarkable how much work you can do when you work in that sort of where you're focused solely on something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely the way to do it, because distraction's like a prowling lion looking for whom it may devour.
Right. Yes,
So,
for sure.
what inspires you, and what do you do, or what do you go to re-energize your creativity when you're feeling drained?
I'm inspired by the same things, I guess, that inspire everybody. When I'm feeling down, I'll watch, a movie that I really love or a show that I love. I go to comics. There are certain comics that I've read and reread thousands of times, and I'll go to those books and focus on those, or I'll read some new comics to just get the creativity flowing again. You mentioned Image not long ago, and I have a stack of Image trades here in my office that I haven't gotten to yet. And that's a great place to go when I'm kind of feeling drained or down. I'll pick up one of those and just sort of experience a new story. And that typically kind of recharges me. That and a lot of naps.
Nothing beats a good
lot
nap.
of naps. Yeah. But no, that's usually it's reading. I'll go to short stories that I love, or novels that most of the novels I'm reading these days, I find that I don't have time to reread a novel anymore. I used to do that in my younger days. But I'll start reading. I'll read a novel, or read some chapters of a novel that I'm enjoying. But often it's going to a comic, either a comic I've read before that I loved, or going to a comic that I haven't read anything of yet. So I'm kind of diving into it fresh.
So, in your career, you've worked with some awesome creators. Who are some dream collaborators that you would love to work with in the future?
Alan Davis is somebody I've always wanted to work with. He's definitely up there in the top. Art Adams, who I'm working with, he's doing covers for X-Men Blue. But it'd be awesome to work with Art Adams on an actual comic.
Yeah.
I mean, he's somebody that inspired me when I was younger, for sure. Chris Somney is someone that he and I were actually pitching stories years and years ago before either one of us broke in, and we've never actually worked together on anything that's been published. So it'd be nice to maybe work with Chris again someday. But that list could go on and on forever.
Sure.
But those are three I think of right off the top. Those are some collaborators I'd love to work with.
Well, I have another question for you that's a list that could go on forever, so just a few.
Right.
Are there any comic characters or titles that you haven't had the chance to work with that you'd love to?
Oh, yeah. Pretty much any of the horror comics.
Yeah.
Man-Thing, Tomb of Dracula, Werewolf by Night, Night Stalkers, any of those horror books would be kind of awesome. Greg Smallwood, who drew recently is drawing Moon Knight right now, and we're on a panel somewhere, and we both realized that we both love Night Stalkers from the 90s, and that we both have sort of a vision for revitalizing that property. And so there's another one I'd love to work with, Greg Smallwood.
Well, I look forward to reading that, because Greg Smallwood's art is phenomenal. So
yeah, and on DC side, Etrick and the Demon, or Clarion the Witch Boy, or Swamp Thing, all are characters I'd love to do something with.
What has been the most rewarding moment or project in your professional career?
Every project's kind of has different rewards. So for me, when I was a kid, my dad and I collected Uncanny X-Men together.
Yeah.
So writing Uncanny X-Men, that title, was a dream for me, and it's very rewarding. But at the same time, I look at a book like The Six Gun, where we wrote 50 issues, and where I wrote 50 issues, and we produced 50 issues of the comic, plus some miniseries and spinoffs. Mm-hmm. And I'll take the Pepsi challenge with anybody, anywhere. I think every issue of that book is solid. And I'm my own worst critic, but I think every issue of that book is great. And I'm proud of that book. So having been able to tell that big of a story, and tell it in our own way, and do what we wanted to with it, and actually get to the ending on a creator-owned book like that that's hands down the most rewarding and satisfying thing.
Well, I don't think you're alone in saying that those issues are really good. I've heard a lot of high praise, and I've enjoyed what I have read. So far, I haven't finished the series, but yeah, so I think you're spot on there. It was a great series, and you should be proud of it.
Yeah, no, that's an easy one. But every project has its own rewards and everything, but hands down, Six Guns the most rewarding for me.
All right. Well, the final question I have for you in this interview is that we have found while talking to creators that creators often have a discerning eye for media. What are you really excited about right now that you can recommend to us as far as music, film, books, and so on?
The thing is, and everybody asks me this question, but I feel like I'm always a couple of years behind everybody. I feel like I'm going to say, you should watch Breaking Bad, and everybody knows you should watch Breaking Bad because it's the greatest show. So that's a tough one for me. Current, and I've already told you that I sit and I have a stack of Image books that I haven't even read yet. But I love Southern Bastards, and I think if you haven't read Southern Bastards, that you should definitely check it out. In comics, and that's probably my number one recommendation for you is to check out Southern Bastards. Besides checking out all my stuff.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to promote or talk about that we missed?
No, I think we covered it, man.
All right. Well, to wrap up, how would you tell everyone how they can follow you online?
Yeah, you can always visit my website is cullenbunn.com. But probably the best way to reach me and interact with me is on Twitter, and my handle on Twitter is @CullenBunn. So pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your Inhuman writing schedule, or X-Men writing schedule. The Inhuman probably is the bad word to use there, for being on today.
No, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
So, before we go to recommendations, did you hear about the Marvel controversy about diversity in female leads in comics not selling.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. It has been a grim week to be a Marvel reader. It has been a grim week, honestly, to be someone who has in the past talked about diversity, talked about representation, talked about voice in the comic sphere. I have generally gone a little further than most people to defend, the work that the big two at least have been doing in this space. But they don't make it easy for me, Vinton. They just don't make it easy. This was pretty catastrophic this week.
Yeah. Marvel has done some amazing things, taken some amazing strides. And I put almost all of that on the writers and artists who work for them. Very often what you see, or what I see in the industry, is that these people that are higher up in the system make these type of comments. These people that are higher up have these certain ideas, and they're just so out of touch with what the reader actually wants. And we saw that Marvel is going to keep pushing for new number ones and new big events. And that is what's hurting Marvel's sales. Yeah. And I almost hope that they just cut out most of the diversity in the female leads, thinking that'll like fix them as a company. I can stop reading as much Marvel. I can get caught up on some other things. And they see that their numbers fall even further as they continue to do giant events and relaunches of number ones, because those are the things that I know I hate and I'm against. And everyone I've talked to that's a comic reader online, in person, also said that. People at comic book shops, the people running the comic book shops, also say this, that these relaunches are making it difficult to shelf. It's making it difficult to help people find the comics they want. And these large events, they can't even get them out on time. They stretch them out too long, and they're just throwing so much out there trying to get you to buy all the comics. I just feel like they're doing the same thing they did in the 90s, going, hey, we can come up with all these ideas. They make a ton of money, and they're just going to bankrupt themselves doing all these things.
Yeah, I'm so confused by this constant relaunch schedule, particularly at Marvel, because who is buying those comics? Someone must be buying the comics. Somewhere in Marvel HQ, there is a spreadsheet that says new number ones sell more, that they make more money off of these titles. Yeah. I don't understand it, because you're absolutely right. I have never spoken to a comics reader who is like, I love every big event. I'll buy them all. I'll read them all. I'll read the 45-part summer crossover. I'll do whatever I have to do to keep up with the stories. I mean, there are people out there, but they're in such a tiny minority. I don't know who is wandering into a comic book store today and picking up new number ones just because they've been launched.
Right. Yeah, and the problem is, I think, from what I've heard, the way that they tally sales. And it's that when I go into a comic book shop and I buy 5 comics, Marvel never knows. They'll never know that I bought those 5 comics. They only know when the dealer orders comics.
Yeah, the sell-through
and those
to the
comics
dealer
can literally just sit on the shelf until they have to clearance them or throw them away or something. And Marvel thinks those comics sold.
I guess that makes sense. That is where the hype cycle comes in. That is where this idea that each big event is necessary, that it's going to be a vital part of continuity. Nothing will be the same after this particular spectacular summer blockbuster. That makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, distribution in the comic book space is messed up.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that I love physical comics. I mean, I read digital comics all the time, but I love still physical comics. I'm kind of hoping that we just shift to digital completely, and that we can cut out this entire infrastructure that supplies, I don't know. Comic book stores, I guess, can run trades, I don't know how much money the average comic book store makes on floppies anyway. I can't imagine it's that much.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of looking forward to a time when, at the very least, these numbers are more transparent and we get a better sense of how these companies are actually doing and which titles are really selling and which are selling because of controversy, because of hype, because of some extraneous factor.
Yeah, and of course, big events sell. And of course, if you throw in all of your popular characters from the past 30 years into an event, they're just going to sell well. The problem is that we're all getting event fatigue, and that's going to just keep going down and down. And it's not because you're getting diverse. It's because you're doing the same thing over and over again, and we're tired of it, and you're stretching things out, and we're getting tired of what you happen to be doing. So it'll be interesting to see. One of the other things that made me upset recently is that I found out that, and this was a while back, I guess, but Marvel was offering free digital copies with their floppy issues, and you get a digital copy of that issue that's in your hand. And when you redeem that, it will give a small percentage, but a percentage back to the comic book shop that you bought the comic from.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So they would get like 10 cents on the issue, or maybe it was a penny on the issue. I don't remember what it was exactly. I was talking to a shop owner recently about it, but they would get a little something. I don't know if they still do that part of it, but I do know that they changed it, and you no longer get a digital copy of the issue you bought. You get some random number ones that they want you to try.
which is, I think, a really egregious missed opportunity. There was, I'd seen on the internet in particular, just a lovely kind of flourishing trader market where you would go and you would buy the floppy, and then you would go on Reddit or wherever, or on Twitter, and you would say, I have this digital code, trade me. Someone swapped something out. And it kind of brought back that sense that I had from, the mid 90s.
Yeah.
Where you would have your collection and your buddy would have his collection, and you would swap comics. You would actually trade them out to try and build whole runs. You know?
I saw the opposite side of that too when I worked at a bookstore and we bought used comics. People would buy the comics, use the digital codes, and then just go sell the comics because the digital comics cost just as much as the physical ones. So why not buy a physical one, use the code, and then sell it back and make a little bit of money, and then you go buy more comics, and then people can come buy used comics who can't afford the new comics, and it just really pushes, I think, the industry. I know that the idea of selling things used and buying things used, but they're still buying the comic. Those other people might not have bought that other comic. And I just think it's a way to push it. It's a way to advertise. It's a way to get the comics out there more. And it's a really missed opportunity, like you said, that they're not doing that anymore.
I think so.
Definitely want more diversity and more female leads in comics. Marvel, are you listening? Please. And I really do appreciate all the writers out there and the artists and what degree that they have to say who's going to be in the comics that push that, and they are pushing that still. And I would encourage anyone listening to this to go support them as well. Buy those comics, buy them in single issues, get a pull list, because Marvel doesn't pay attention to trade sales for the most part. If it doesn't sell off the rack in single issues, that series is getting canceled and that character is getting put on the back burner.
Yeah, because the lead time in comic production is so awful.
Right.
I mean, now more than ever, I guess, that you're right. Those single issues have to hit. They have to hit big, and they have to have buzz too. And I would add to what you said, talk about the comics that you love. Talk about the comics that are speaking to this diverse voice and this diverse industry, the kind of industry that we want. Go on Twitter, go on Reddit, go wherever you go on the internet. Go and talk to friends and the folks in your local comic shop. Go and spread the word, because that, I think, also carries with it a great weight in terms of perpetuating these comics and in terms of continuing these stories.
Absolutely. So moving on from talking about the comics industry, there was a bit of news this morning I just wanted to share on the podcast, since usually I'm telling everybody their news a week or so late. Today I have fresh news that you'll hear just from a day ago as you're listening to this, if you're listening to it as it comes out, that the Defenders teaser got accidentally dropped and then taken off very quickly.
Yep.
It just features the four of them in an elevator and Sigourney's voice saying going down, and then Jessica Jones notices the security camera watching them and stops it, and the time stops at 8/18/2017. And so people were saying, oh, this might be the release date. Apparently, as of recording this, while we were recording this, they updated that. Netflix actually released the teaser and confirmed the date as August 18th of this year is when we're going to get the Defenders. So that's exciting.
Something to look forward to. Yeah. I'm still hopeful. I still think that the Netflix Marvel series have been far more successful than unsuccessful. I'm into the kind of stories that they're telling. They're expanding the scope, I think, of what comic book storytelling on the small screen can be and what it can look like. So I'm staying positive. I'm right there, but of course I'm still hopeful for Wonder Woman too. So
I am really excited about 3 out of the 4 Defenders, and I won't say which one I'm not that excited about, but I will tell you he's the only white guy that can see in the team. So, moving on from there to our normal part of the show, recommendations. Alastair, do you have any recommendations for our listeners this week of what they should read or watch?
I have 2 recommendations, both of which are older because, as I said, I'm trapped in this retro space right now. The aforementioned 1602. If you haven't read it, go read it. If you have read it, go read it again, because there are things within that comic which have become so much more timely and so much more resonant for me the older I get. And of course, the way the world has changed over the course of the last decade. It's so fascinating to see what must have been, of course, unintentional foreshadowing of real life events, but there's some really interesting depth and complexity in 1602, so I can't recommend that highly enough. The other thing that I have done in the course of the last couple of weeks is rewatch the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. And I just love those movies. They're joyous, they're bright, they're exuberant in a way that, well, I mean, hopefully we all feel good about Homecoming. We all feel good about what's happening to Spider-Man in the MCU right now. So I think we're going to see a new high watermark there. But it's worthwhile, I think, to go back and look at Tobey Maguire and to look at the way that this Peter Parker was formed, he was such an interesting, subtle perhaps, but such an interesting variation on the standard 616 Peter Parker. He really worked for me. And I've got to tell you, going back to it, Spider-Man 3 is not that bad. It's not good. I'm the first to admit it is not good. It is kind of a car crash of a film. But there are things about it which I find thoroughly enjoyable.
I find Sandman thoroughly enjoyable in that film, but that was the only really redeemable thing that out of memory. I might have to go back and rewatch. I might take your advice there. I wasn't a big fan of Tobey Maguire. I liked that he wasn't like a very traditional pick for that character, the physique and all. Yeah. So I did like that aspect of it, but I didn't really necessarily like his acting. Now, that being said, my favorite Spider-Man movie to date is Spider-Man 2, the Tobey Maguire one, not Amazing Spider-Man 2, but the regular Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock. That was a fantastic film. I really enjoyed that film.
Good. So good. And really stands up too.
Yeah. So my recommendations for this week, I will first say definitely Legion. If you haven't watched Legion, go watch Legion. It's 8 episodes. It's now streaming on Hulu. So check it out. And as far as comics go, because of All New X-Men coming to an end with issue number 19 and it wrapping up so nicely, guys, All New X-Men, this run of it, 2015 run, was the best X-Men title that was going, the best X-Men team that was going. And if you haven't read that, I would highly recommend it. I would highly recommend all of All New X-Men since the Time Displaced team first showed up. It's all been really good for the most part. And this run was definitely the best of the X-Men that we had. So if you want to read an X-Men line to get into the current X-Men universe, that's a really good one to jump into. If you're not wanting to just jump onto these new number ones that are coming, if you are, X-Men Blue will probably be the place I will recommend. We will see and we will find out. I haven't read them yet. Those previews are not enough to judge what's going to be good and bad off of, but we'll see. So those are my recommendations for this week. So, Alastair, once again, thank you for being on the show. Plug your stuff. Where can we find you? What do you do?
You can find everything from me over at pointnorthmedia.com. I generally talk about stories for a long time every week. I talk a lot about stories, you guys. I am currently running, a number of different podcasts. I am producing the There and Back Again seminar series, which is a series of live YouTube broadcasts in which I discuss the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. There's only, 12 episodes of that show already, so it's easy to jump in. Actually, today, as we're recording this, Vinton, I am launching my second seminar series that's going to run concurrently, which is called Storms on the Way. It's a look at first the novel and then the TV adaptation of Neil Gaiman's American Gods. Apparently, I'm in a Neil Gaiman mood, is what I'm saying. So I'm really looking forward to delving into that book, getting really, really deep into the weeds on that book. I've talked about Harry Potter and talked about Star Wars and talked about Pride and Prejudice, which is the one outlier in that group, I think. That's basically what I do. And of course, we do the aforementioned Excelsior over at commonroomradio.com.
Yeah, that is a comic book podcast where we talk about comic books and comic book media. We take one episode and we dive into either a volume or two of a comic book or a movie or a season of a television show and look at the story, the structure, the behind the scenes. We talk about how well it worked, how well it didn't work, the things that we loved about it, and we just geek out about that thing. For one whole episode. So check that out. Follow that on Twitter at ExcelsiorCast and give it a listen, give it a try. So once again, thank you. And we are out. You can find me at Flesh Eater on Twitter.
You can find me at Paper Bullets, PAPERBULLETS.
If you'd like to support the Graphomania Podcast Network, check out patreon.com/Graphocast, GRAPHOCAST. And we will see you next week on Read Brave. This has been a Graphomania production. If you would like to hear more podcasts, go to graphocast.com, GRAPHOCAST.com. Follow us on Twitter at Graphocast and like the Graphomania page on Facebook for news and updates.